you?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Yeah, visiting the Houston free thinkers out here. It's been an amazing couple of days since I got here.
Yeah. So you've been traveling all over Turtle Island there, and doing some exploring. And what's the idea behind your mystical journey?
Well, I mean, the broad idea is just being of service to others and working on healing myself, as I see those as the two most potent ways to move the ideas of freedom and cooperation forward. Right now, the focus has been, I don't know, it's been kind of cool just hanging out with, going to a few different spots and hanging out with people who I've followed on YouTube and stuff for years now. I left Oregon. I was back for a couple weeks and just launched into this new little piece I'm calling the Road to Anarchapulco. And went down to Arizona and stayed with Adam Kokesh, helped build out on his land, and just actually got to know him for the first time, because we've had conversations here and there at events and stuff, but never together for days at a time with just a few of us around. And that was pretty awesome. And then came out here, and these guys had their 12th for the community festival, which was fucking awesome. It was just a whole day of 3 stages of anarchists. For them, I would assume most of them are, and all of them are, whether they know it or not. But it's really good music, some great vendors, and I brought cases of freedom from Adam to give away, and it was great. The conversations that handing out a book like that will start. And then there was a Standing Rock benefit concert here at the Freethinker House 2 nights ago, and yesterday was kind of just recovery day. And my next scheduled stop was Montana, but the event up there got canceled. One of the people throwing it ended up in the hospital recently, so now I'm just kind of looking around. I got a week to get to do whatever, so I'm seeing what's gonna fill that gap. And then back in Oregon, Washington for a while. I'll be back for the longest time that I have since I hit the road, and go back and revisit all the old communities that I connected with when I was around, and do interviews with them and stuff, and try to help spread the work that's being done out there.
Intentional communities. Yeah.
There's a ton of them around Oregon and Washington. There's 5 eco-villages just in the city of Portland itself. One of them used to be a hotel that they converted. Now it's 45 apartments. We took out the entire parking lot and put in bike parking, covered the whole thing with solar panels. And they're 15 blocks from the center of downtown.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
But they have they have a whole garden on the roof or something, or every window has a pot plant in it or something.
They've got some hanging stuff. They've got just a bunch of garden space around it, because it was a good sized lot that they it's a full city block, and so they tore out all the concrete in the whole thing and just put in gardens and some little walking trails, and it's got parking for 80 bikes out there.
Great. How did they go about starting a project like that? Did they squat the hotel until they take adverse possession of it, or they funded it, crowdfunded it, or how did they begin it?
That one, the hotel, I think, just went up for sale, and there was a few people that got together and just managed to come up with enough to get a down payment started. And then once you have a piece of land or a building like that, the people just come flocking in, because there's way more people looking to land somewhere than there are with the land already.
Mm-hmm. And then they just all right, I can hear you now.
Oh, good. I'm back. I'm in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so I just turned up, but we're talking about people that are setting up homesteads, and people would just turn up to help out?
Yeah, well, we're just talking about, I'm about to head back to Oregon and interview a bunch of the communities out there. And so you're talking about some.
Cool.
Yeah, he was just asking about like how they get started, and there's one in Portland that was a hotel, and they bought up the old building after the hotel closed and just converted it to apartments and stuff. And then there's another one, Foster Village, it's called, and it's, again, right near downtown Portland, and they bought a house, just a couple people, and then they had friends move in and pay rent with them, and then the house next door went up for sale, and they got some more people together, bought that house, took down the fences, tore out all the concrete, split the property again, and they built Portland's first straw bale house behind it. So now they've got 3 houses on these 2 little plots, and a huge permaculture farm. They've got like 6 different styles of compost going at all times. It's amazing what's going on right there. It's one of definitely the place where I've seen the most integration between these villages and people still living in the city. Most of the time it's folks a good hour and a half outside of town or whatever. And in Portland, we've got them just spread out all over the city itself.
Yeah, that blows me away in the city because, I mean, it's usually land prices, right, that keep people away from the city.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess most of these started at least a few years ago. In Portland, was still relatively cheap until the last 3 or 4 years. And then with weed legalization, the prices have just started skyrocketing. What
a bummer.
Yeah. Well, that and the California drought pushing a lot of people north.
Yeah.
I guess the home prices have like doubled the last 2 years, so it puts it right on par with where Denver's at nowadays.
So with the drought, I mean, I know it's pretty bad, but that's just a little bit I've picked up. It's enough to have people leave in the Californian area.
Definitely, yeah. There's like so many pieces of it. There's just the general weather. Some people don't like the heat and stuff like that. But then there's actually areas where they've instituted, water rationing and stuff. And certainly during the dry seasons, a lot of Southern California ends up with water rationing. And so people that want to, be able to do whatever they want with their water when they're at home. And then the cost of living down there has always been crazy high too. So moving north, you tend to save like 10% every 500 miles or so as you move up the U.S.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward, and it's not hard to look up any information to let you know that most real estate prices are bubble-like. So I think there's a lot of people here in Sydney as well. Is probably the most affected here in Australia. That is just getting out or moving up. But then that just moves the effect out further to wherever they're moving to.
Right. Yeah. Paying for a place to live. I don't know. It's crazy.
It sounds insane. Who would have thought of that?
Right? You can see my house over there. Just chilling.
Yep. It's got a veranda and everything. You're killing it.
Yep.
Great. So, Kenny, you have all these, you managed to sniff out all of these events and festivals and stuff across the US. Is it easy to do to find these things, or you network and you meet one person and they know a person? How does it work?
Well, it's a little of both. There's a lot of them that are pretty well known and stuff, and just by searching for, transformational festival or whatever, you'll come up with a good list. But yeah, it's been mostly through like networking and stuff, and just meeting people, and they tell me about the little one in their town and the little one here, and here for the community. It's relatively big. They've been doing it for years now. They're on their 12th one. But it's mostly like a Houston-based thing. If I hadn't met Derek and the crew at the Jackalope Freedom Festival in Arizona, I never would have known about it. And so that's where, on my website, I've got the spreadsheet that I've been making. I'm up to like 170 of them now that I know about. And that includes a bunch in Europe and a couple in Australia and down in South and Central America too. And now I've got friends who, when they hear about one, I'll just like get random text messages that say, you know, like Costa Rica Fruit Festival, and then like a date. And I just have to go look it up and add it to the list. But I've got people doing little bits of the research for me now too. Yeah.
Well, so with these communities and festivals, I mean, you're probably one of the only people that I know that really have dedicated themselves to going from one to one. But I got to ask you, I mean, I don't know whether you've heard, but in April, Joanna and I are due. So I'm wondering, is there families that follow these things as well? Because I'm gonna be rolling in a crew now.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be interesting. So I don't know. You turn up and you see like you know, babies running around at these things as well. I mean,
oh yeah,
it has to be.
That's one of the best parts actually, specifically at the things that aren't quite festivals, because the festivals themselves are still very centralized. You know, it's a production team coming together with very clear laid out plans for the whole event for most of them. But then there's things like the Rainbow Gathering and like the Jackalope Freedom Festival, where they pick the time and the place and kind of set the intention, and then people come out and do whatever they're going to do. They bring stuff to set up, they bring stuff to sell, that sort of thing. And so both of those, you know, the first like 4 or 5 days of Jackalope, before a lot of people showed up, there were just like, there was a pack of kids just running around all the time. And there was a tall kid at the front, and there was a tall kid at the back, and a bunch of little ones in between. And they would just run around the woods and, you know, take care of themselves. There was a rope swing that a bunch of people told them was broken and they weren't going to be able to use. And then an hour later, they're over there swinging on it because they fixed it.
Freedom works.
Yeah, exactly. You want to see anarchy, just let a bunch of kids do what they want to do. And but yeah, I know a few. I know one specifically, one gal with her baby. They've been on the road for 3 years now, you know, and they're at Rainbow for about 2 months, and then they do little Rainbow regionals and land on farms during trim time, you know, out in Northern California. But there's definitely people doing it, you know, from single up to like whole families. Like there's some that are, you know, multiple children and like the grandma and the parents all rolling around in a bus together.
No way.
Yeah.
Nah, that sounds like the coolest thing. Well, I think a lot of people probably think, okay, you know, while their kids are younger, they still have time. They still have, you know, until they have to go to school, and then they get bogged down in routine. You and I know there's options for school. Are there groups in communities that do their own like you know, version of homeschooling, but you know, like different parents jump in and help out? Like, have you seen that as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, most of the families that I see at those kind of events are pretty much on. They're either, you know, homeschooling, unschooling, or at the very least they're doing like a Montessori, Waldorf, Sudbury, you know, one of the less hierarchical schools, one of the less authoritarian schools. But then there's a lot of organizations that's their whole focus is offering like education at these events, actually, like offering, you know, edutainment at this stuff. Up in Colorado, there's a group called Rainbow Lightning that my friend Taylor started, and they have it locked down to where all the festivals up and down that corridor there, the I-25 corridor, they are the kids' village. So they come out and they have a stage and they have a sound system and they have a bunch of geodesic domes and they have, you know, truckloads of art supplies and stuff. And the whole activist community up there is the people that volunteer to make that happen. So like Elias Clay, you know, at any of these festivals, you'll see her on the stage over in Kids Village teaching little kids how to freestyle and stuff. And you'll see, you know, the sound guys showing these little kids how to set the stuff up. And you'll see, you know, it's really beautiful how that's been integrated into almost all of these. There's a real focus on showing the kids, you know, things that are different from what they're used to. It's not just come over and there's a bunch of things to play with. Like, it's all educational, you know, learning environments for them.
Great. Did I hear you drop a new word? Edutainment?
Edutainment, yeah.
What is that?
That's like what they call it on television when they make something that's supposed to be educational, but it's actually just crap. So I think that's what was being tarnished a little bit. But I like it. I like Kenny's use of it. It makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I didn't know. Is it good or is it bad? It's like, I don't know. Is it Sesame Street? Who knows?
Yeah, totally. Sesame Street is edutainment.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it gives them both. And, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's the best way to entertain people is to or to educate people is to entertain them.
Yeah.
And that's definitely. It's a big. I don't know. It's a big shift getting people to realize that like education doesn't come from one person giving information to another. Education comes from all of your experience. When you watch somebody do something that you've never seen anybody do before, you just learned about it. And if you go ask them about it, and you just follow your interest, and that's what I've seen a lot of these folks, whether they send their kids to a school or not. That's the real focus on what they're teaching them, is that they can always be learning, and that the school environment isn't the be all end all.
Yeah, exactly. But that shift's coming. I mean, I think I personally meet more people that are looking at different things. Even within my family, which is shocking considering who some of these people are. But it's good. I mean, overall, it's good. But then it could just be, okay, this is a little crazy, but it could just be me. Like, Kurt and I say, is this happening worldwide, or are we just meshing into different circles and, changing our networks? Because a topic that came up a few weeks ago was these ayahuasca events and, different plant medicine style ceremonies. How come I didn't know anything about this stuff before? And then now it's like, there's always a friend that's doing something like this, and you hear them popping up all the time.
Yeah. Well, that's the nature of reality, right? Like you don't notice it until you're looking for it, and then once you expect it to be there, you're gonna see it everywhere. That's the beauty of it all. The more you look for these things, the more you know that they're out there. The more the universe proves that to you. Yeah,
it's magic.
It is. It's awesome. No, that's like the biggest thing you can see in kids who grow up in Rainbow. And now I know some who were like in their 20s and early 30s even, who grew up in Rainbow. They grew up living on a bus that was hopping between these events and stuff. They never went to a school. They never had a house somewhere. They were always at home everywhere. And you can, they aren't ever disconnected from those ideas. They never lose the knowledge of how the universe works and get put into a little box and then have to unlearn that and relearn how the universe works again. Like, we can skip all the back and forth and just, help the kids remember their power when they come in. That, it speeds the whole process up a lot.
Yeah. Just don't brainwash them, I guess. Let them have a good time and enjoy learning and away they go.
Yeah. I'm excited. It looks like Dana Martin's workshop is going to be 2 days this year instead of just one down at Anarchapulco.
Awesome.
So that's going to be pretty cool. That was definitely one of the highlights for me last year.
Yeah. So that was. I mean, you found it very interesting, even though you don't have any children, do you, Kenny?
No.
So what did you learn from it, or what perspective did you get?
I mean, most of it was already, the perspectives that I've already come to around, peaceful parenting and stuff. Like that was the one thing on Molyneux's channel that I went through all of, really it was just hearing about all their specific personal experiences with this stuff. And, from their first kid who was born in a hospital and they had him circumcised, to the last one that was born at home, she was by herself, he was in the other room, with zero pain. And like the evolution of as they realize these things and getting better at it and trying not to judge themselves. All the beautiful sounds of the city, police sirens and helicopters. Jeez. But yeah, it was mostly just like the listening to them, and a couple of their kids were in the room, and it was Dana and Joe, her husband. They were both talking, and some of there was some interaction with the kids too. And for me, it was crazy because I wanted to go to the workshop, and it ended up being that I got to go to the workshop in exchange for making treats for after her talk at the conference. And then that led to spending like all day Saturday hanging out with them and their family over at the Freeman's house. So it's like, my goal was just to go to this workshop, and I ended up spending like 2 days with them, hanging out with the family, going to dinner before and after that. And like, now we stay in touch and stuff. Like, is perfect example of how it always just ends up being better than you can even imagine when you trust the universe to take care of it.
Well said.
Oh, by the way, I don't think I told you, Kenny. So a couple of weeks ago, I took ayahuasca, and you were in one of my visions. Actually, a couple of them. Yeah, because the the message was kind of like, hey, life's this great big adventure, and you can do whatever you want. And you were standing there, and you with this big smile on your face, with like the world in your hands, because I guess you're kind of this symbol to me about living life the way you want to, and taking off and having an adventure without limits. Yeah, that's
beautiful. That's the whole. That's the best I hope for out of my work, is to, let people see what's possible through doing it. I only talk about stuff when people ask about it. I just do me, and that, yeah, it's, I don't know. This is a great time to be alive, and a lot of people get caught up in like, oh, I can't believe I didn't learn this stuff earlier. It's like, who the hell cares? You're there now. With the technology we got now, we could live to be 200 years old. Like, who knows? Just enjoy the ride, and man, it seems like the best. I don't know. It's like it's the most fun, and it seems to be the most effective as far as like activism goes. Like, it's how my networks and my reach and all the things that make all the force multipliers for activism have started expanding exponentially since I stopped really doing like activism, as most people call it, and just started living as free and happy as I could be.
Right. Yeah, really living the message, I guess.
Yeah. That's
great.
Yeah, it was so cool. Adam's place, he's got 40 acres out in the middle of the desert. And then there was like 10 people up there when I went up, and it was just amazing. Like, automatically, somebody would start making breakfast every day. Somebody would start making lunch around that time. Like, the flow just happened really quickly. And I found out that there's one couple that already lives up there. They've been up on the mountain for like 40 years. They've got the guy, Shane, he's moved rock, like hundreds of tons of rock, probably. He's got like walls. They're slowly building their whole like mountainside into a castle. And he's like one of those true, like, just leave me alone libertarians. He does a little bit of the online stuff, but really he's like, just don't come up my hill. Do whatever you want to do as long as I'm not involved. And, it was really cool having him there in all these conversations. The whole week we were out there was just like focusing on the optimism of it, really. It was just all of us sharing like the different reasons, the different experiences that were so optimistic about the shift and where it's going. And he came over and he was like, I don't know, most people don't want to listen, and most people this and that, and we're all just like, I don't know. We're going into stuff, and then as the conversation progresses, he stopped and he's like, I just had like the biggest self-realization. I'm a Rube. Like, I just ran away from the city. I ran into the country 20 years ago and haven't looked back. Like, I only talk with, people from a small town. It was really interesting to see, the philosophy is still so strong there, but just like, kind of feeling disheartened about it just because he disconnected. And we stopped by his house on the way out of Adams, like 2 days later, and looked around. He walked us through, and there's like petroglyphs and all sorts of edible cactuses and berries. He's like, he just plants stuff that's local, basically, so they don't have to tend to any of it, but they've got food all over their property. And it's just awesome to see, like, somebody just doing it. No community there necessarily. Like, it's just one guy. His wife has a city job, and she pays the property taxes and stuff, and he built the house, and he's building the walls and built the gardens, and just really being self-sufficient and only interacting as much as he has to not have them come after him with guns.
So they really do have a little, well, not exactly a food forest, but that sort of thing.
Yeah, the desert version of a food forest. Yeah.
I hope he's got peyote in there as well.
Probably. I didn't see it, but I bet it's out there. You get enough land in the desert there, and it's going to be around even if you're not cultivating it.
Totally.
Yeah. Apparently, there's about 20 cactuses with similar chemical compounds.
Oh, wow.
So there's probably one of them growing in Arizona, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But and then there was a couple that had just moved out there from North Carolina. And they got 40 acres, a plot or two over from Adam's land, and they, myself and a couple other people that are out there, they're like, "Hey, you guys want to come over and pick out a parcel? You can have an acre." So if I want to go live in the desert, I'm set over there now. That's kind of cool. It's great to see people. They had never heard of the Rainbow Gathering or the Rainbow, any of that stuff. And they had just started getting more into like the anarchism, like the philosophy behind it. But they've been living this stuff for years. That's the beauty of it, is most people live anarchy. Like the average person lives anarchy most of their time, and most people live anarchy like all the time. And it's just that they don't have the labels for it.
Yeah. I was saying, someone on Facebook was saying to me today, 99.9% of people believe in government and this and that, and I was like, not really, dude. Like, especially outside of the United States, I think people, and even within the United States, people aren't especially pro or anti-government. They just kind of live their lives, and they try to avoid they try to avoid government where they can a lot of the time, and just do what they want to do. It's only those certain few that actually really like kissing the ass of the state or whatever.
Yeah. And it's usually people who are so traumatized, by having like violent authority figures in their life that they just have to play that role, or they're just benefiting from it, and financially or power-wise, or their level of renown in their community or whatever is based on sucking up to the state. It's not usually. It's not like, I don't know. I guess I can't say usually, but I haven't witnessed it where it was anybody that was like, "Man, it's really fun to be the state. It's really fun to be an IRS auditor." They're like, "Well, it's the only job where I can make $60,000 a year with my education," or whatever. It's still.
Yeah. I think these people we can't really say that they're kissing the butt of the government. I just think they haven't been stepped on, or they haven't been put in a position where they're being screwed by the government. So they don't think about it. They're just going along, and they think. They're occupied enough to say this is normal. This is my normal life, and everything's as it should be. And then one day something happens, and all of a sudden, the government's not there the way they think they should have been there, or the way that they expected. And then everything changes. Like the reality just cracks, and that crack just turns into a split. And then later it's like, against the been hiding out, a whole new group.
I can't hear you.
I'm going again.
Oh, you're back.
It was just breaking up for a second there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's hard to believe from this perspective, at least, that there's people that, yeah, like you put it, like, yeah, you know, government, yay, everything's great. I love paying the tax, and I don't mind if they don't tell me what they spend it on. That's cool. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, I know. I do know people like that. They're normally academics. They're normally going through. They've volunteered for an extra 4 years of indoctrination, or education, but with a heavy government slant on it. Those people do exist, but I don't think they're exactly in the majority.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kenny, something you said a little bit ago about the guy that left, just got up and left the city life 20 years ago, and he's kind of on his own, doing his own thing. Meeting people like that, I'm sure that there's more examples of, maybe not 20 years ago, but people just left their city life, just got up one day and never went to work and said, I'm living differently now. How is it cool seeing their perspective when they ask you, like, so what's happening back in the city, or how disconnected are they exactly? Because I mean, things are moving quick, and there's a lot of weird stuff going on now. I mean, we're gonna, like, I saw a few of the Tesla cars in, cruising around here, and I didn't even know they were in Australia yet. But they're just cool to see. Like, we're seeing like this new future moving into reality, and someone that's left the city pretty, I'm assuming are pretty behind on what, what's like the latest version of the Facebook app or something. And does that blow them away?
It depends on the person. Like this guy, he's still, he's all over like the freedom, the liberty forums and the message boards and stuff, so he stays up to date with a lot of that stuff.
Cool.
I've definitely met a lot of people who, unplug to a much higher extent. They don't want it to be in their head at all either. And for them, it's, I don't know, it's interesting, because then they usually end up with just a very small trickle of this information from like some family member or something. So it's really weird to hear their opinions on stuff and their understanding of what's going on in the world, because it's usually just such a small little piece. But yeah, definitely the technology stuff blows. I mean, it blows people away that live in the city and watch the news. And you start talking about 3D printers, and there's tons of people that are like, "Oh, what do you mean?" And it's like, well, we can print anything basically, and we can do it on like a almost molecular level at this point. We've solved the need for factories. Like, we just have to implement it. You talk about things like, the sling blade water filter, or the bicycle powered generators, or, there's so much of this stuff that, to me, it blows my mind when anybody doesn't know about it. And so I'm definitely not surprised by the people who have.
I haven't heard about those. What's that? Sling blade? What's that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the name of it. We'll have to check it just to be sure. But it's a water filtration system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Sling blade.
No, that's not it. Crap.
Okay.
I'll remember the name. It's something like that.
I don't remember the name, but what's the idea?
It's just a water filter that was designed by a kid. He was some teenager, and it runs on less energy than the average refrigerator. It's pretty small. It's like a couple foot by a couple foot cube, and it'll filter just about anything. Biological materials, radiation, salt water, all of that in like thousands of gallons an hour, and they're super cheap comparatively. We could put them everywhere for much cheaper than what any of the old style water filters would cost. It was one of the things. It was one of the things that the guy who started 5 Hour Energy. It was one of the projects that he they could fund it. I don't know if you've seen the documentary about.
Sorry, the documentary about what?
It's let's see. It's called. His name's Manoj Bhargava. He was the founder of 5 Hour Energy, and basically the whole thing, the whole idea of the company is just to put tons of money into technological innovation to help solve problems. So they created like the most efficient bike power generator that we've seen so far. It's like a half an hour of riding a bike to run the average household for the day. They created this water filtration. Well, they don't create any of this stuff. They find somebody who's working on these projects and needs the money to actually do the R&D and stuff, and then they just throw money at it. It's it's a good documentary, and it's amazing to see. He already gave up. It's like 99 point something% of his income that he's put into these things already.
Wow.
Which still leaves him a millionaire, obviously. It's not like he's hurting, but yeah.
Well, that's cool. I mean, if he's if he's still living well and he's helping other people as well, like that's fantastic. Yeah.
So I think I missed the name of the documentary. I don't know if it was cutting out for both of us or just me. But there's a documentary that goes through all that?
Yeah, the documentary is called Billions and Change.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, it's founded 5 Hour Energy. And once he became a billionaire, he was like, all right, now I have to, do something with all that to make the world better. And so this is all about him. Yeah.
Great.
I'll have to find the links to that other filter. It's one of those ones that hopefully the person hasn't been disappeared from the internet or anything.
I wonder how much of that actually goes on, but the fact that we even mention it means it exists at some level.
Right.
Like everything's real somewhere.
Which is pretty awesome. It's just a matter of whether you're going to run into that reality or not.
Right. Cross the bridge into another world.
Yeah.
So Kenny, one thing I wonder about, I know, you can call yourself a voluntarist, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely align with those ideas. I don't really call myself much of anything, but yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So you like these voluntarist ideas like non-aggression. You also like the ideas of community or communism, people joining together and helping each other. And so I know sometimes it seems like a lot of people who call themselves anarchists or anarcho-communists, they're resistant to the ideas of voluntarism, like the idea of not respecting private property or about non-aggression. Do you find that that's a common thing, or is that maybe I get a skewed perspective because it's just that it's the angry people on the internet who I get into arguments with or whatever?
There's probably some of that. Definitely most of the people I know who identify as an anarchist or identify with the philosophy of anarchy have a much different definition of property from like the ANCAP one. They definitely don't believe in private property for the most part, but it's more like personal property, and we actually had a few really good conversations about this over at Adams with some people like very strongly on both ends of the spectrum coming in, and a lot of us playing that middle ground. So it was really beautiful because there's these ideas of like, okay, well, where does property come from? How do you own this thing? And there's like the homesteading stuff, ideas with land and everything. And I feel like a lot of that leaves a lot of gray area too, because it's like, oh yeah, you can homestead the land, you can take the land as long as it's unclaimed, and you can use it. It's like with today's technology, one person could one person could actively utilize, thousands of acres. In the old days, that wasn't possible. It would have been clear that they were claiming more land than they could use. And so, I don't know, that whole thing, for me, it really just comes down to, unless you make it or someone else unless it's made by a human, and even then it's coming from raw materials from somewhere else, that still doesn't mean it's ours. Everything you own is still there when you die. It's not like it disappears with you. It's never yours. You're just using it. It's just a matter of people who view private property. Something that was explained to me recently, or that I actually, I just heard for the first time in conversation in Arizona, was people saying, no, my property is an extension of myself. Your property, your bag, he was talking to me, he's like, your backpack is an extension of you. It is necessarily your property because you use it. And I'm like, well, it's my personal property in the sense that I'm using it for sure. But I feel like that sort of thing is basically justifies violence. It puts property on the same level as human safety. If you're saying, it's the same violation of the non-aggression principle to come and take your stuff as it is to come and use violence against you, physically, then you're saying that your stuff is more valuable than another person's physical being. I feel like there's just a lot of programming from the system, from this very scarcity-based, competition-based, consumption-based system that's been running for so long now. It really makes people feel super attached to their property. And with that comes, a lot of really emotional responses that aren't based in philosophy. It seems like, it's one of those. It's a lot like talking to people about, cutting animal products out of their diet. A lot of the times you can have a conversation to a point, and then it just turns into like la 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 la. Like, no, this is, and you can't get anywhere with it. And it'd be nice to be able to have some really solid, something, that solid middle ground for these different groups. And I guess really we have that just in the sense of, community wise. Like, if it's all decentralized, then the anarcho-capitalist community can do their own thing, and they can all trade with each other and everything. And the community next to them, where everyone shares all their property, can do that, and it doesn't. No one's having any interactions that don't fit their own philosophy.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I
think that's a really important law, I guess you call it. The law is, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So if you go to a place where that's the culture, where there's only personal property and no private property, then you observe that culture. And if you go to a place where there is private property, then you observe that rule.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Makes sense to me. And it just seems like the easiest way to deal with it. And it I don't know. It's an interesting one, because I just don't, I don't really have either. I kind of lean towards the personal property thing, but even that, I don't care. I have no interest in property whatsoever. I have interest in access, and that's one of the things I like about the Zeitgeist movement and those, the resource-based economy model, is that it's based on people don't inherently need to own things. They need access to things. People want to own things, especially people growing up in America with all of this programming, or in any place where it's programmed that your possessions kind of define you. Oh, you have a big house and a nice car, that puts you in a different social class. Like this, those things cause people to feel like they need to own things and stuff. But really, you don't need to own a bike. You just need to have a bike available whenever you want to ride it. There's a lot of middle ground there that we can work towards, with things like 3D printers. Okay, it's summertime. Your community prints out a lot more bikes. Okay, and then the summer's over, you break them down, melt the raw materials back in, and you print out a lot of, sleds for the winter. Or, we can just adjust how many of something is available to the demand.
Yeah. I think Aaron told me that in Amsterdam, what's the situation with bikes in Amsterdam, Aaron, with communal bikes?
Well, yeah, it's kind of tricky because it comes back down to I was there years ago, and there's more bikes than people. I mean, well, at least it feels that way. So you think, if there's a bike there and it's like the whole city's just for riding around, what's the problem if I borrow a bike and ride it and I leave it somewhere else and someone else uses it? And I'm sure there's people that think like that. But then it comes back to people wanting, I have a bike and this is my bike, so I put a chain on it so that it's available for me. And if someone was to break that chain and take a bike, then there's like a lack of respect there. And obviously someone's values are going to get broken, and someone lost a bike. So, but the thing is, a lot of tourists turn up. It's a big city for tourism, and you can get a bike. You can get a bike for, it's not expensive, maybe like $10 a day or something. You can hire a bike, but then they give you a chain, and then there is like a respect for bikes, but there's not like an abundance where you can just grow a bike wherever you want. And just cruise around.
Because I thought you told me that was like there were bikes that were kind of assigned to be for anyone.
Well, where the hostel that I was staying at had a whole bunch of bikes, and you could just borrow them and bring them back, and there was no dramas. And there was people that would bring back bikes that weren't from the hostel, and like, whoops, I don't know, I just found a bike. So the hostel, I think, was growing a collection of bikes. But it's interesting with this property stuff because it's like, if you go somewhere, you follow the rules that are local. It's like there's people that don't respect that, and we all need to be in the same understanding. And even if if like say one community had one way of thinking and the next community, it's like, at what point do they touch each other at the boundaries? And then is a certain level of, we need to convert the other guys to us because we're correct and they're not. And I think it comes down to respect. Like if we all respect each other and respect the way we think, and we're smart enough to understand that we all don't think exactly the same, then there's no reason why we can't have different communities alongside each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's part of what Rainbow shows. There's just the very few kind of guidelines throughout Rainbow. Just treat everybody there as family. Don't hurt anybody else. And then there's the different communities inside of it. There's the kitchens, the camps, and each of them have, different rules. Like Instant Soup, the kitchen that I'm part of, is a vegan kitchen. The rule that we have that nobody else has, the agreement to, our culture is there's no animal products under the tent, under the tarp. We've got like a 100-foot tarp that covers our whole area. And so, but we don't expect any, obviously we don't expect that to apply anywhere except directly under our tarp. And that if we can have, I feel like if we just have the basic, like non-aggression, like I love the non-aggression principle. I think that it doesn't, I don't apply it to property necessarily. Like I'm not going to go around just like taking people's stuff that they use, but I also don't, if I took somebody's stuff, I don't think they would have the right to use violence against me. I think that would always be an escalation if you're doing something to the physical human body after they did something to your property, your inanimate stuff. But it's, I don't know.
It's just with the non-aggression principle, because I know it was actually Kurt that brought it to my attention, and that's a funny story within itself. But I mean, you think about it, like I actually think it's interesting. I actually think I'm pretty more passive. Like I think depending on what it was, I think if someone was to, because the example that was put forward, if someone's stealing your wallet, what's that? What is someone's level of, it's just like, if you're not awake by now, you're in big trouble. Yeah, so the non-aggression principle. If someone steals my wallet, at what level can I inflict violence upon them to get my stuff back? And it really depends on what it is, because I think if somebody needed it that bad, like, I got to the understanding in Mexico, because I thought, the chance of me getting mugged in Mexico is pretty much higher than back here in Australia. But it just changed the way I was thinking. It's like, you know what, if I was to get mugged and someone tried taking my ring or my watch, it's like, maybe I don't need such an expensive ring or watch. And maybe if they want my watch, I'll just give it to them. And just, wish them all the best. Like, there it is. I hope it serves you well, or I hope you get some good money for it, for whatever you need. And that's the end of it. It's like, so easy just to hand something over. And it's like, you know what? I'm not in a position where that's going to affect my life. I'll just go buy another watch, and it's not a big deal. Or my wallet. It's like, yeah, I've got enough cash for the day. If the guy robs me $10, like, you know what? I would have given it to him if he asked me for it, and that's it.
Yeah. That's kind of. Some people tell me that is kind of a weird unwritten rule in Mexico. Like, if say you're in Mexico City and somebody stops you and say, "Hey, I'm sorry I have to do this, but give me your wallet," and you're like, "Well, all right, if you really need it, go on."
Yeah, I've heard those stories about how they guys get on the buses they mug the whole bus, and there's one at the back of the bus, like, jumps in the back door, there's one on the front. I mean, I've never seen it, but this is what I've heard. And they're waving their guns around, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm basically going to go home and pray for myself for doing this. But yeah, my mate's got a big garbage bag, wallets, phones, and jewelry in the bag. Again, I'm sorry, I don't want to do this. It's just, we're in these times." And it's a funny dynamic.
It sounds like they're taking a little more than is what's necessary. I mean, do they have 200 kids?
Yeah, I don't know. This is the buses are packed. I guess I'm talking peak hour on a bit after peak hour, maybe 8 o'clock at night. Out in the outer suburbs of Mexico City, and there could be 40 people on a 25-seater bus, and you're squeezing through, and the whole bus just gets robbed. But
crazy.
Yep. But people adjust, and people know I've got enough for my ticket to get home, and that's it. And people don't buy expensive phones because they know the chance of it actually sticking with them. And they don't they don't buy things of value, or they don't take it to work. It's like, it just they go expecting to lose it, and they wonder, how long is it going to be before I lose this? I don't know. Well, then I'll just get the cheap one just to get me through the next month or whatever. Just complete change of mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it was a big kind of a weird thing with the 43 and Ayotzinapa. Do you know much about this, Ken? Well, am I still here? Can't hear anything.
No, I'm here. If you can hear me.
Okay.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know much about the situation with the 43 and Ayotzinapa?
The what?
Okay, that's a no, I guess. So, 43 teaching students. They call them normalists. That is, teachers in normal schools or like high schools, and for some reason they have this tradition where the students will go and commandeer a bus. So they go and they'll stop a public bus and they'll say, "Hey, listen, Mr. Bus Driver, we don't have any money, but we need you to take us to these locations." And the unfortunate thing was, this is interesting too, because it's this practical like a real life example of what you're talking about the placing property above human life. Because what happened was, I mean, if the bus driver just, took these normalists or these communists around to a couple of places around town and dropped them off, and that would have been it. But the unfortunate thing was, there was a large amount of drugs in that bus, which the bus driver was like moonlighting as a drug trafficker, and so the cartels found out about this, and they're like, "What is going on? Like these university students is trying to steal our drugs, or what the hell is this?" And so apparently what happened was the cartels called the police, and the police said, "Okay, well, we're going to take care of business." And I believe 42 of those 43 students are still missing. So when I first got the whole story about it, I was like, well, if you go around stealing buses, I mean, something like that might well happen. Not that they deserved it, but that's that's the kind of consequences which can happen. But yeah, I mean, from your perspective, there's no there's no way that could be justified, even in I don't know what I'm saying. I mean, the point is, I mean, they probably shouldn't have died in any case, and the property was placed above human life, and that's the sad thing about it.
Yeah, I definitely don't. Yeah, obviously cartels aren't really acting philosophically, anyways. They're not principled in their way of doing things. But
yeah.
About 2 months ago, we actually had a talk up in Denver. We Are Change Colorado has weekly meetings, and once a month, the meeting is just a discussion on a topic. And the last one I was at was self-defense versus violence. Where do we draw the line? And so we went through a lot of these different, old things like the Code of Hammurabi and things like that. Where people hear an eye for an eye. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, like, an eye for an eye wasn't if someone takes your eye, you get to take his eye. It's if someone takes your eye, you can take no more than his eye. You can't. It's the idea of only up to the same level of force. So if someone is threatening you, they're saying, and a lot of times it's not even like a true threat. It's not like, I'm going to kill you if. It's just, hey, do this. And the threat is implied. Then there's some level of, there's like immediate danger there. But like if someone breaks into your house while you're not there and takes your stuff, and you like got back home and saw him and shot him, it's pretty, or even just tackled him even, I wouldn't necessarily say it was wrong, but you did escalate the situation. It went from something that lacked physical violence to a situation with physical violence. And, the non-aggression principle is great, but I feel like it misses out on the fact that just because you can use violence in response to violence, it doesn't mean that it's ever going to be the best response. It's not necessarily going to be the most effective. It's certainly not going to be the most, healing. It's not going to be the response that moves mankind forward. A big thing that has been getting caught on to, I found recently, is unitive justice. There's this woman, Sylvia Clute, is the main presenter on these ideas, and they've been having unitive justice circles, trainings basically all over Colorado in the Midwest, and then she's starting to do some tours, or at least I'm starting to become aware of them. I'm sure she's been doing it for a long time, and they're running through actual role-playing situations and stuff, and it's a truly like anarchist approach to these things. And although she would never say that, it's not necessarily what labels she uses for things, but it is. It's the idea of how do we make the victim whole, and how do we heal the societal causes that would lead someone to doing that thing, you know, because most crimes don't happen because someone's a sociopath. Most crimes happen because of, you know, socioeconomic pressures of some kind, whether it's childhood trauma, you know, they just lost their job and they're broke, and, you know, or a drug addiction or whatever. There these things that are systemic. They're not like, it's not like someone's just making a personal choice to go do this. It's usually based on a whole lot of
Oh, where'd you go?
Yeah. Well, and hopefully comes back in a minute. Something I kind of saw on these lines a little while ago. It had to do with the situation in South Africa, and in South Africa, they've you know, they get carjacked a lot. Well, this is what at least I'm led to believe. So there's car manufacturers or companies that make accessories for cars, and they've got these like anti-carjacking systems where there's like flamethrowers that come out the side of the car. So if you're like held up at lights, you press the flamethrower button, and then your dude gets at least hopefully more scared than crispy. So it's like just enough to, like, you know, maybe put his hands up, drop his gun, or you know, at least gives you a chance to get away.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it makes you think about, well, Kenny, what you're just saying. Like, I think a lot of people, they have this idea that, yeah, I can defend myself with force. They've already like predetermined that. They've got that in their head that if someone tries to mug me, yeah, I can fight back, and that's okay with them until it actually happens. And then when it happens, everything's like this reaction. And like if somebody, if I got caught in a fight, I wouldn't, because I don't fight every day, I would have no idea how hard I punch. And just in the reaction and the adrenaline, you know, I just knocked somebody out by accident. I was like, you know, I didn't mean to hit you that hard. Like I didn't mean for you to fall over and hit your head and die. I didn't mean to punch you in the chest and stop your heart. Like I didn't mean to do any of this. It's just that you scared me. And I was already in that understanding that if something happened like this, I would react like that. So, I mean, that's where I think the non-aggression principles kind of, it's good, but it needs to have like a reactionary understanding, and people need to be, at least they need to face to what level am I willing to go and for what things. Maybe like an earlier, or, you know, a pre the situation understanding, because most people that say, okay, if someone holds me up and they've had some kind of training, that they're going to go full force straight away, just because they're you know, the adrenaline kicks in and they just take over, and all of a sudden, you know, they don't know what they're doing. It's all reaction.
Right. Well, that's the thing, though, is that it's also, the more training you have, the more familiarity, you know, the more that you've practiced being choked out or being thrown around, or, you know, the more that you've been in these situations in a you know, a not life-threatening way, the more practice you have of that, the better you can respond to these things. You know, someone who's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is much less likely to accidentally kill somebody when they come at them with a knife than somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, you know, and just reacts out of that natural self-defense instinct because they don't know their strength. And the guy who's done jiu-jitsu not only knows his own body more, but he knows ways to stop that person without causing, you know, that kind of permanent damage. You grab wrist and shoulder, break their arm. Like, you get, you know, there's a lot of, it's just like a person carrying a gun who has, you know, no practice with it, really. They just carry it because it makes them feel safe, versus someone who has gone through training and does, you know, like practices with it and practices how to defend themselves without it, so it's not their first response as well. You know, it all comes, it's all about preparing yourself physically and mentally, you know, for whatever situations you think you're gonna face. And I feel like there's just it cuts back on the fear a lot too. You know, like I'm nowhere near a black belt of anything, but I know that I can defend myself. I've defended myself plenty of times, and I know what it feels like to get hit. I know what it feels like to get cut. Like, I'm not worried about those things, and also, there's a lot of, I don't know, people have attachment to a lot of stuff, from their life to those possessions, and that attachment makes things a lot more difficult. If somebody came and asked me for anything that I have, give me your backpack, give me your wallet, give me your whatever, like, okay, I don't care. Like, I'm not going to be like, woo, somebody took my stuff, but, it's not going to have an emotional impact on me like that.
Yeah.
Because I don't put attachment to those things. And I feel like it's the attachment to those things that can make the response dangerous a lot of times. If someone's stealing your grandfather's watch, you're going to react a lot less critically than if someone's just like, hey, give me the $100 in your pocket. Because one has an emotional attachment and the other doesn't.
Yeah, good points.
Yeah.
I just think, people need, well, kids, when I was doing Krav Maga, there was, which is like the Israeli and hand-to-hand combat, always before class, if I got there early, it was so cool to see kids that were in primary school learning these same skills. And I mean, it's basic. I mean, they weren't doing like full-on fighting. It was more like just grappling and just the way kids would play normally. That's basically the way I describe it. The way they just wrestle and throw each other around. But they're learning their strength. They're learning how to move. They're learning how to fall correctly, and how to get up quickly. And I just thought, this should be primary school. Like, how is this not in society, built into the systems of education? And then you got people that grow up and they've never seen or done any of this, mainly because of interest, and they're living in the city and they're working late, but they've got no like personal skills in anything to self-defense or anything reaction, and it's like they're in a very dangerous place for them and people around them, because they don't know how to carry themselves.
Right. Well, and if we look at it, really, it's kind of a new thing. There's very few points in human history where you didn't have to know how to defend yourself, whether that was from, the next village over, or the next empire over, or the mountain lions between your house and the nearby town. For most of human civilization, there was that level of, you could get attacked by something, and people carried a knife, they carried a spear, they carried a musket, whatever. And I feel like it really, it opens people up to the victim mentality a lot more when they actually don't have any tools to defend themselves in a physical sense, a purely physical sense. If you don't know how to use a gun, you don't own one, you don't know how to hand-to-hand fight, you've never practiced that, if you don't know these things, then anyone with any level of experience there automatically can victimize you. And I feel like that's part of why it's not in the system right now, because then you can have cops who don't shoot very well, and they've got poorly made guns, and their training with those things is very minimal, but they can still overpower people who have no training whatsoever really easily. Whereas like any average cop goes, pulls a gun within a couple feet of someone who has, whether it be military training, Krav Maga, jiu-jitsu, judo, you're going to have that gun out of his hand before he can do anything, because there's action-reaction times. If you're within 10 feet, generally the action is going to be faster than the reaction. So if I move towards you, I'm going to get to you and do whatever I'm doing before you can respond to it, unless you are trained and have, this honed reaction times as well. But it's really, if you don't know how to defend yourself, then in your mind, you are a victim already, even if nothing's ever happened to you. You just, when you hear about somebody being robbed, you can visualize yourself being robbed, because you're like, oh, I wouldn't know what to do. But if you know what to do, then you're like, oh, if that happened, then I would deal with the situation.
Yeah, it's the only time in history where we're unable to defend ourselves, and that's the way that society's built it up. And it's incredible. I mean, I can't even have something like a pocket knife that you'd use just for pruning a plum tree or something, or a tool for a knife tool. You can't have in Australia unless you've proven that you're going to work or you're coming home from work. It's like, it's illegal. You can't have anything. I don't know. Like, are they going to take that to, you can't have a screwdriver on you,
right?
Or you can't carry, a stainless steel pen, because that could hurt somebody. It's going way too far. It's
I think that's the way the laws are going in the UK.
as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh well.
Even to that extreme. Yeah, I mean, even a butter knife might be illegal to carry. Maybe
technically carries the knife name. The little one, the soft cheese with, but it's a knife.
Yeah. Well,
I forgot I had it.
There's one story I like about Emperor Norton in San Francisco, and there was like two big gangs. I think it was like a Caucasian gang and a Chinese gang or something. And it looked like things were going to get really messy, like maybe 20 or 50 people on either side. And Emperor Norton walked directly in between them and got on his knees and started reciting the Lord's Prayer. And I guess everybody was just so confused, they just walked away.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder, like, is this some kind of, not exactly a cheat code, but like something you can say to somebody in a really intense situation, which makes them just maybe change their state very quickly. Like some people say this comes from NLP, where someone is really angry at you and you go like this to their face and you say, "I love you," and it makes them so confused that they have to stop being angry.
I've definitely seen a lot of ways that you can shift somebody's energy really quickly that way.
Yes.
A lot of my activist work before I left Portland was with the Portland Peace Team, and that was our whole thing. Is we would do trainings for ourselves, practice all the time, and then we would go out and offer trainings to different activist groups and stuff on nonviolent conflict de-escalation. Okay, you're doing a protest and guy on the street starts screaming at the crowd, you lazy, worthless hippies. How do you de-escalate that? Or someone in the crowd is like about to throw something through a window. How do you de-escalate that? There's always ways we can redirect the energy. We can help shift each other. I know I've had experiences myself where we were in Guatemala heading into town to get groceries for the Rainbow Gathering. So there's like 9 of us in an old Chevy van, and we're going down these beat up highways, and then there's a police or a military or some guys with machine guns set up a little blockade, and they stopped us, and they're asking for paperwork and stuff, and obviously the car has no paperwork. None of us had paperwork. I think I had my passport and one other person had a passport, and they're like aggressive, and it's looking like it might not be fun. And so I give him my passport, and they get the other one, and the driver hands them to him, and he gets out of the car to talk to him a little bit, and I just sit in the back of the van. I just start ohming, and everyone else in the van starts ohming. And about 2 minutes later, they just give him back our passports and tell us to leave. They didn't ask for a bribe. They didn't hassle him. Just nothing. They're just like, here you go, move along. It's it's correlation, not causation, by any means. But I've definitely experienced, being able to shift somebody really quickly. Like one of my favorite Adam Kokesh video is, the nonviolent communication from his first book tour. Like, it was somewhere in the South, and obviously he's talking about his time in the military and, how much he regrets it, and, the illusions that people are under when they go into the military. And then as soon as the talk's over, he's going downstairs to like hang out and sign books and stuff, and this big, military or ex-military guy comes up and he's like, I heard you were talking crap about the armed forces, this and that. And then it's just like a 5-minute video of this guy literally like, let's go outside right now. Like, what? Like, if he wasn't in a bar where he was probably a regular, he would have punched Adam right that second. And within a couple minutes, he's taking a copy of the book and walking away completely deflated. That anger is gone, and that was when Adam had like pretty recently discovered nonviolent communication and started practicing those things himself. I feel like that's You know, there's so much aggression in things that we can move past just by doing it ourselves. You know, by working on the basis of that aggression in ourselves. Like here, so today there was the no DAPL, the Dakota Access Pipeline. There's a worldwide, or at least nationwide, protest today, and I found out about it, you know, while it was going on. And the company that's running that whole project is actually based here in Houston. And so there's a bunch of people down there protesting, and Derek went down to record it and be part of that. And he said it was about an hour and a half of just people and chanting and, you know, being outside and having signs and everything. And then everybody looks over because there's a ruckus, and the cops are throwing somebody on the ground to arrest him. And they, you know, he runs over, and Derek's like, "Get off of him! Get off of him!" You know, the video will be up really soon. It's pretty intense. And he got back, you know, and he was in tears about it because he was so disappointed with the aggression with which he responded to the situation. You know, and it's like, that's not that, we can't bring the same thing to it and expect to change what's going on. You know, you can't add fire to fire and get anything but a bigger fire. And it goes into, you know, not just our actions, but the way we communicate. And it's, I don't know, I feel like nonviolent communication is one of the most important things we can all learn and practice, and how that applies in, you know, whether you're dealing with a drunk person, whether you're dealing with a police officer, whether you're just dealing with something that comes up, you know, you get some kind of news and anger flares up in yourself, and how you process that. We've as a species, the human race is pretty emotionally stunted from, you know, generations of statism and control, and not learning how to communicate emotions, and not learning how to process our emotions, you know, learning to cover them up, to mask them with drugs and alcohol, to write them off as just animal things that we don't need. You know, that's why, yeah, my focus is so much on like the healing side. That's, you know, working on my trauma, getting rid of any of those automatic responses to things that are based on animalistic urges or old programming and stuff. You know, there's a lot to be said for how much the brain forgets things when it comes into these high stress situations. You know, and it's going to go back to the more physical, emotional responses rather than your logic. You know, when somebody pulls a gun on you, if you haven't ever practiced what you're going to do in that situation, if you haven't practiced how to, even not that situation, but how to calm yourself in a moment of fear, you know, like I've been having a lot of run-ins, not a lot. I've had some run-ins with the road pirates here in the U.S. recently, you know, and they all wear their badges and their uniforms, and your first response when you see the flashing lights is like, hand, heart starts racing. It's like, oh shit, a guy with guns behind me, and he wants to come up and steal my stuff. And it's, you know, it's been really good practice to get in the habit of, you know, just really dropping into the body, focusing on your breath, long, slow breaths, calming yourself down, steadying your voice, and then dealing with them, whatever way. Huh? Yeah. And Derek's gonna be filming something too. But yeah, it's been really interesting to see like how the reactions change from them versus when I was, you know, doing protesting and, you know, activism in that sense, where I never had any interactions with police that ended anyway, but like we were both really frustrated and angry, I'm sure. You know, now the last time I dealt with them, I was piloting an automobile through Colorado, and he comes up with his lights and comes over and he's, you know, do you know why I pulled you over? And I said, you know, no, I assumed there was some sort of emergency. You turned on your lights, you know, declaring a state of emergency, so I was getting out of your way. Can I see 3 pieces of identification that prove you're a law enforcement officer? And he's like, what are you talking about? Well, legally, you have to give me 3 pieces of identification to prove that you're a law enforcement officer. And so he pulls out his ID and his business card, and he's like, I've got these. I'm like, well, that's only 2. And he's like, oh, it doesn't matter. I've got those. here's the thing. I pulled you over because of this and that. I'm going to see your license and registration. And I was like, well, I don't have any paperwork to give you. I'm not a driver. I don't have a driver's license. Driving is the act of operating a motor vehicle for commerce. We're just traveling home right now. And, back and forth for a while. And he leaves. He goes back to his car. And I would assume he's going to, like, run the plates. He's going to, I don't know what he's doing back there. And an ambulance went by at some point before he came back. And he comes back and ducks down a little bit more, and he sees my friend Chelsea in the back seat with my video camera, recording the whole thing. And all of a sudden, his tone changed a little bit, and he's like, "Well, you saw the ambulance go by. I've got to go where it's going, so I'm gonna let you go. If you had just given me your paperwork, I was just gonna give you a warning. You don't need to be a street lawyer. Was I being rude to you? Was I being mean to you? I was being polite. Next time one of us is trying to be polite to you, just cooperate." And then gave me his business card and drove off. And I'm like, it was just such a weird. And of course, we got done, and none of the video actually recorded. The camera just didn't take it. So luckily, nothing happened, because I would have not have had any of my evidence. But yeah, it was a great experience to really start practicing that stuff. And coming at it in a completely non-aggressive way, super respectful, but also like, no, I know what I'm talking about, and I know that you don't have the right to do anything to me. And he just like, this is not the citizen you're looking for, and he just left.
Right. Yeah, gotta look for an easy target. So I saw your post like a month back talking about some of that. Maybe not exactly free man on the land stuff, but it's along those lines about declaring your own sovereignty or something like that.
Yeah, getting just disconnecting from the matrix. There's this good friend of mine, Jay Noon. If you look him up on YouTube, he was a free stater for a long time. He's done a lot of that like combative in the courtroom activism. His family never paid taxes on their property for a long time. None of them have Social Security cards or driver's licenses, and they just go fight it in court all the time. And yeah, he's coming to Anarchapulco this year, so that's exciting for him to be bringing that down. Yeah, I had a run-in with the road pirates in Colorado again a few months ago. I was delivering a truck from a friend to another friend, and like 4.5 hour trip, and I literally got pulled over 1.0 miles from their house, and the cops just giving me a hard time. They gave me a ticket and all this stuff, and I just said, yeah, okay, whatever. And I went and talked to Jay, and I was like, so what do you think I should do? I'm obviously not going to pay it. I'm obviously not going to go into court. And he turned me on to a lot of research by some guys like Curtis Collenbach and a few others into what the birth certificate is, what the certificate of live birth is. The foundation of these things. A lot of people know like the idea of the straw man. The all capital letters name isn't you, but not like the more in-depth part of that. Like, what is it? Where does it come from? When you're born in a hospital, they take the afterbirth, they take the placenta. And I have friends who were just having a conversation about this yesterday. I have friends who they would not let them keep the afterbirth. The doctor, like, they will take it from you. And they threaten to call the cops and stuff. Right? Well, what it is, or at least what these researchers have come up with. Obviously, I haven't like seen these. We can't really see a lot of the inner workings of the state. But the idea is they take the afterbirth and they claim it as abandoned property. It's an article in commerce that's been abandoned at sea. 45 days after that is when the certificate or the birth certificate is created. And that's where the all capital letters name first comes from, is the birth certificate. And you'll never see the original copy. The mother gets like copy number 3, the county gets copy number 2. Like the original is the Smithsonian, the Vatican, like one of those super hidden places, And
New York Stock Exchange.
Right. Yep. There's a lot of ideas, and who knows. But they take that same name that is your name. The certificate of live birth has your name written, capital first letter, lowercase for the rest. and then the birth certificate has all capital letters. And the certificate of live birth, most people never even get either. The certificate of live birth, basically, at least what this understanding explains, and what these folks have done, and it seems to be working. Again, court, like Jay's had tons of cases just thrown out. They give him the ticket, he goes to court, and they're like, "Oh God, no, we're just not even going to deal with this." But the certificate of live birth is literally the title for your body. Just like the pink slip to your car. Like, it is the ownership document for your physical body. And there's a process of getting an authenticated certificate of live birth, where you get the certified copy from the county where you were born. You send it off to the state department of your state, and they authenticate it, saying, yeah, this is the true copy and everything. And you send it off to the Secretary of State of the United States, and then you have a fully authenticated copy, which is legally as good as the original. And so there's this whole process of, like, now you actually hold the ownership document for your body. That's why they treat people like they do here. The police can just throw you around, and they're not going to get in trouble, ever. They can do whatever they want to your body, because they are enforcers of the corporation of which those bodies are property. Or at least, in the game that they've created, that's the way that it's set up. And that just led me down some really big rabbit holes. A lot of this is stuff I had heard from Jordan Maxwell back in the day and stuff. But there's just so much of this crazy, I don't know, it's like the pseudo occult, just weird. I don't even know how to describe it. There's just so much weird shit that goes on with, like, the paperwork there and all those numbers and the names and stuff, that there's something to it. Because when people start stepping out of it, when they claim the DNA afterbirth, like, that's another thing. You can do a paramount claim of DNA and afterbirth. You can get the afterbirth back, because it's your property that they've been holding. No one claimed it. Your mother didn't ever put in the claim to that abandoned property, but you can. And when you do these things, it just, I don't know if it's necessarily works the way that these guys explain it, but something works, because the way that the government interacts with you changes completely at that point.
Yeah,
so there's I don't know if it's just because they don't want to talk about it or what, but there's something, there's something to be said for it.
Yeah. Well, I think so. Barry Cooper did an article a while back about this, and he's helped a lot of people get off drug charges and that sort of thing. But his take is that with this kind of stuff, the reason they leave you alone is because you file so much paperwork that it just makes it not worth their while. And I think that's probably part of it, but I don't think that explains everything.
Right.
Because I went to court a couple of times, and I started asking all these questions. One guy who has a different take on it, he doesn't call himself free man or sovereign, Mark Stevens. And his thing is, like, he just asked just a few questions, and it's generally along the lines of, well, do you have any proof that you have this document, like this law, the code of the transport rules or whatever? Do you have any evidence that this document actually applies to me or has anything to do with me? And they're like, well, we think it does. Or they don't answer the question, or they say, well, you're in the jurisdiction of the state. And you're like, well, what's a state? Are you talking about a corporation, or are you talking about a physical location? Because there's, the state of Arizona is different to the physical land.
State.
Yeah. And so how can you tie those two things together? But I remember when I went into the court, and I started asking some questions, and sometimes the magistrates would get very angry, and sometimes they'd get confused, and sometimes they'd try to do everything they could to bamboozle me, so I didn't ask any more questions, and basically made it so I couldn't get did their best to prevent me from getting a fair hearing, or even tried to, like, even schmoozed me, the last magistrate kind of flirted with me, or charmed me a little, and won me over. So I stopped asking so many questions.
Was it at least a good deal?
She didn't reduce the fine. At least the first magistrate reduced the fine.
So all this stuff with birth certificates, and I mean, I've looked into it, but it's becoming more real now that I'm going to have to deal with this myself for future offspring,
right?
In 6 months' time.
Right.
So, I mean, it's been crossing my mind, but I need to find out like a good source of where I know exactly what I'm doing, because this is what we do. It's about peaceful action, and not waiting until something happens and then trying to work out how do we reverse stuff. It's like I need to work out what to do now. I haven't found exactly a foolproof. Here it is, the steps. Walk through this, and birth certificate. This is what you need to do, and click this and send that paperwork in. I mean, I'm going through an immigration process right now that is nothing short from insane, and you can't call anybody, you can't ring anybody. I've got an agent that's working directly with me now because time is too time consuming, and it's a legal immigration process. So you literally need to be a lawyer to be able to fill the forms out and understand exactly what you need to do, because they've done it that way on purpose. They don't want people coming to Australia anymore. That's the only conclusion I have. And I mean, I'm fine, but I mean, I'm not willing to send my wife back to Mexico. We've been married for over 2 years. We've been together for almost 4. It's like, why now? Just because I'm home? It's got very complicated. So yeah, I'm not a big fan, in short. But I've got a lot of work ahead of me, and it's incredible. Like the amount of time I've put into this, and getting documents sourced, getting the apostille credited. I mean, you got to do that. Everything's got a cost to it. I'm talking. I could buy a house in Mexico and live. For what? I've got to invest in this, and I don't even know if I'm going to hang around Australia. It's very complicated. So I need to work out for my child coming along. What do I do, birth certificate wise? Because I haven't seen anything. Have you come across any comprehensive, future family stuff? Because Kurt and I haven't spoken about it too much.
Not anything comprehensive like that. I know a few people who are going through the process and kind of sharing it. Like Alma Summer, she's the founder of the Jackalope Freedom Festival. She's got a YouTube channel and a blog and everything called Undocumented Human, about her son Neo.
Cool.
And their son Neo is completely undocumented. They cover his face when they're driving through cities that have the cameras at stoplights and stuff. Like, he does not exist on Facebook. He does not exist. Like, he's completely outside of the system. And so I know they've collected a lot of information and personal experience and stuff with that. But I found a lot of people who have put out guides for like how to get yourself out of it, but nobody that's put out anything about like really how to navigate that earlier part. I mean, I know a lot of rainbows too that they just they don't have, they're born at home and they never get any sort of paperwork and stuff. And there was a family out of Adams, actually, the family that has land next to him, that we were having these conversations because they're on their way to their third baby right now. And the first two, they were totally in the system before. So they have birth certificates. They went to schools for a while and stuff. And now with the third one, they're really torn up with what to do next, because on the one hand, you don't want to put them into this. You don't want them to become whatever it is, the property of a battery for, you know what I mean? You don't want to put your kids into this machine.
Yeah.
You don't want to plug them into this knowing what it is, but at the same time, if it's still around in 20 years and you didn't plug them into it, they can't get a job in it. They can't, if you don't have a social security card, you can't work in the United States, and any legal business at least. So it's really, like for you, like if you're traveling, if you're going to be going from Mexico to Australia and anywhere in between and stuff. Like, if your kid doesn't exist in one of these systems, chances are they're not going to let your kid travel. You know, it's a really screwy situation with these corporations controlling, you know, claiming to own all the land and controlling most of the means of transportation between them all. And I really have no idea. You know, I can't say what you should or shouldn't do, anything like that. I know my plan is, you know, my focus right now is to get myself to being the kind of person that I want to see raising kids. Like, that's my only real like goal or intention. Everything else is just part of that process happening.
Yeah.
And when I have kids, it'll be off the land, you know, on the land somewhere. It'll be totally outside of Babylon, and I'm not going to do any paperwork. I'm not, you know, there definitely won't be any of that involved. And honestly, I'm not even going to bring them into cities or like into this stuff until they've reached the level of awareness, you know, to have a conversation about it. Like, I'm not going to bring a baby into a city full of helicopters and sirens and angry people and traffic and Wi-Fi signals and cell phone towers and all this stuff that the human body can feel, and they have no way of understanding. They have no way of asking you what it is. You know, I feel like that's a lot of the trauma that causes people to shut off, both just like physical senses, you know, you tune out so much, and like those other senses that humanity seems to just kind of lose, except for the more new age type, you know, that movement. I feel like it's because there's all of this that the children just can't handle. So I know personally, I'm going to go like as far to that extreme of my children not being any part of this as possible. But you know, that's because that's just the way that I do things. You know, I'd rather do it the hard way and stay 100% true to my principles and the vision of the world I want to see and what feels like it's going to get us there most efficiently. I'm never going to pick the easy route. I'm never going to take the more comfortable or the safe route when it comes to any of this stuff, because I feel like that's not living up to my potential to change the world.
Yeah, well, I can speak for myself, but I definitely think Kurt feels this way too. You know, we both admire the commitment that you bring to the movement, to the understanding of how to live. I don't know. I'm still in. You know what I mean? Like, you know, sometimes I'm caught between these two worlds of, you know, it'd be nice to be over there, or, you know, sometimes, you know, being here isn't too bad. I mean, you two would have connections still in this machine, like, you know, family members and things, and we still operate in these zones that are controlled. I mean, I'm putting it like as if we're like post world, where it's like I'm out and I'm in. It's like, this is incredible. Who thinks about it like this? But
right.
That's exactly how it is. And, you know, now I'm going to be faced with some tough decisions that are going to impact, you know, the rest of my life, family life. And I mean, at least I'm thinking about the decisions. I mean, I consider that already a win.
Absolutely.
To be aware, because if you're just going along with the flow and, you know, your child's born and it's like, yeah, no worries, we got a new vaccine, you know, we got a vaccine before the baby's born now for whooping cough or whatever. And like, and you know, not all are compulsory, but if they're not taken, well, then what happens next? And then these guys change the rules as they go along, and all of a sudden, you know, you're not accepted in hospitals and schools if that's what you want to do, or whatever happens, you know what I mean? But it's like all of a sudden you need to start navigating these landmines of decisions of what's going to happen to my family, and at what point am I going to receive a knock at the door and say, okay, your child didn't receive A, B, and C vaccination. You're a bad parent, and now the state's got your kid. Right.
Well, and that's what you see happening all over the U.S. constantly. Here, it's a very active thing. There's, you know, CPS, the Child Protective Services is what it's called. And yeah, I don't know the statistics, so I won't make anything up, but I listen to a lot of people who have had, you know, different CPS whistleblowers on and stuff, and I know a lot of people have had firsthand experience of being there when a friend's child was stolen, or their own kid being stolen and having to go through years of court battle to get them back. And yeah, it's absolutely insane. I feel like the most danger you have there is when you're tiptoeing the two. If you're all the way over here and your kid doesn't even show up, they don't even have a record that they were born, I feel like you're safer than if you're in the middle and there's a record of them, but you're not doing the vaccines and you're doing the homeschooling, because now they know about you and they know that you're not playing the game according to their rules. I feel like it's almost more dangerous than just completely disconnected.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it's like they know where they want you to play, and if you're like playing this double life, then you can get in trouble very quickly. Yeah, that's the beauty of doing things the way that I and a lot of the like Rainbow family and stuff do it. It's like none of us have an address that can be found. Like there's like I think the last address that exists on any government document or anything like that for me is a couple houses and like 7 years ago or something. Like so there's I feel like it's weird. It's like truly living in like an underground. It's like in the Matrix where they're like underneath the machines down below, like living in their own little world, and it's over there and they know about it, and if they go over to it they get attacked. But when you stay away, you kind of have some level of safety, and it's so weird as long as you're not talking about it. If you talk about it and you get an audience, then they come after you. That's what's happening with Adam right now. Luckily it's not kids, it's just all the craziness around his land and permits and taxes and zoning, and but he's a face and he talks about it publicly, so they're going after him all the time.
Right, because Adam is actually doing it like he's not asking permission to build anything, right? Right.
Yeah, there's already one. The camp kitchen is built, or was built when we got there, and then the dome is finished now. There's like just a hangout geodesic dome that's been clayed in next to it as well. So he's already 2 over the limit for what he was allowed to have out there right now. And he's got a bunch more buildings he's putting in, and yeah, he's been dealing with them. You know what I mean? He was on a phone call while I was out there with a friend. I don't know if it was Mark. He's working with Mark Stevens. I don't know if it was Mark that was on the phone, but talking to the person, I guess the magistrate or whatever in the area, they had set a date and they were going to have a whole court day for him. And he created a Facebook event, like, come out and protest this, support me. And, hundreds of people immediately say they're going. And the magistrate or the arbitrator or whatever was like, we're going to cancel that. We're going to push it off a few months. And then told the DA or whatever, the state's attorney told him, like, handle this outside because I don't want to deal with it. So now they're offering him a deal, like, here, just pay this one little fee and we'll call it an exemption or whatever, and we'll make a special thing just for your rule. And, so he's trying to set precedent, really. He's not trying to just live by himself off the grid. Like, he figures if he can get them to succumb and give in on some of these things, then the next people can use that as a precedent and just keep pushing it further and further.
Yeah. So
that's kind of just always been his thing when it comes with activism. It's like, I'm going to get myself beaten up by the cops to show people what the cops will do. I'm going to get he makes an example of himself as a big part of his activism, which isn't necessarily, it's not the way that a lot of us go, but it's effective for sure. He's reaching a lot of people and he's showing a lot of people like just how ridiculous this stuff is. Like, oh, you own the land and you can't do anything on it without them threatening you. What? So you don't own the land. Right? Like, either you own it or you don't. If you own it, you can do whatever you want. But in the United States, you can't own land because as soon as you stop paying property taxes, they take it from you. So obviously, you're always renting it. You're never actually owning it. It's screwy. It's crazy. Stuff. It's so crazy.
Yeah. Well, my final note is before I head off is Kurt. I joked about I'll see you back in Mexico, but I wish it'd be Mexico is going to see a huge population increase if the world continues the way it is.
Right?
People seeking freedom.
Because it's like it's written into what Mexico is. Like people just don't mess with you the same way.
Yeah, that's right. You pay off the inspector with a little mordida, a little pride, and then they'll leave you alone, more or less. Or
but you've also got like large native communities that they've got no interest in paying land taxes or interacting with government bodies either. That's like, this is how we've lived before. This is how we're going to do our thing, and that's it. End of story.
Yeah. I can't wait to get back. It's so the average person, their behavior and their view of the state is so different in Mexico from anywhere in the U.S. You've always got the outliers at both sides, but like the average is totally different from anywhere here.
Yeah. Well, Kenny, it was good to see you again. You're looking well, and I'm happy to see that you're strong.
Yeah, it was great seeing you, brother. And I hope everything's going really well. Lots of love to you and your wife. And hopefully we'll see you in Acapulco.
That's a plan.
Awesome.
Sweet deal. Okay. See you, Kurt. Love you guys.
Love you too.
See you later.
Peace.